And mercy. May this hour of worship be one of vision and inspiration. Help us to find knowledge by which to live. Let the words we speak enter our hearts and influence our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in search of you or in need of comfort and consolation. May the offering of their hearts be acceptable to you. And may the prayers we utter here bear fruit in acts of kindness, peace, and love. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'etzivanu la'asot b'divrei Torah. With what shall I approach the Eternal One?
How shall I bless you, God of heaven?
Shall I come before God with burnt offerings?
With yielding vows.
Will God be pleased with thousands of rams? Should I give my firstborn for my transgressions? People tell you what is good, but what does the Eternal One require of you? Only to do justly and mercifully. Elu devarim she'adam ochel peroteihen ba'olam hazeh v'hakeren kayemet lo la'olam haba. These are actions which bring benefit here and now, but whose full value can be measured only in the light of eternity. Let's read together. Honoring one's father and mother, acts of love and kindness, diligent pursuit of knowledge and wisdom, hospitality to strangers, visiting the sick, enabling bride and groom to rejoice, consoling the bereaved, praying with sincerity, and making peace where there is strife. And the study of Torah leads to them all. Aharevna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu u'v'fi amcha bet Yisrael v'nehiyeh anachnu v'tze'etzaenu וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך ולומדי תורתך. ברוך אתה אדוני, המלמד תורה ויעמוד בישראל. ברוך שאמר והיה עולם, ברוך הוא. Praise be the one of whose command the world came to be. We praise you, our God, sovereign of the universe, worshipped by your people, lauded and glorified by those who love and serve you. With songs of praise we extol you and proclaim your sovereignty, sole source of the life of all worlds. We praise you, sovereign God. Sing for joy to the Eternal One, you who are righteous. The upright do well to give praise. Give thanks to the Eternal One with the lyre.
Make music to God with the 10-string harp.
Sing to God a new song.
Well with shouts of joy.
For God's word holds good.
God's every deed is done in faithfulness.
The Eternal One loves righteousness and justice.
Theirs is full of God's kindness.
By the Eternal One's word the heavens were made.
And all their hosts by the breath of God's mouth.
At the divine command the ocean waves rise.
Gather is said in the folds of the deep.
Let all the earth revere the Eternal One,
Let all the gods stand before God.
who spoke and it was.
The commanded and stood firm.
How shall I sing of day and night when it is God who formed them? How shall I sing of heaven and earth when it is God who founded them? How shall I sing of mountains and hills when it is God who planted them? How shall I sing of deserts and seas when it is God who begot them? How shall I sing of earth and her fullness when it is God who bade them be? I shall sing of the one who fashioned them all, the one who is above them all, God, God alone, I shall sing. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Hallelu bekodsho, hallelu birkia uzo, hallelu bigvurotav, hallelu kerov godlo. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Hallelu betek ha-shofar, hallelu ben-nevel vechidor, hallelu betof umachol, hallelu ben-minim ve'ugav. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Hallelu betziltzele shama, hallelu betziltzele truah. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. La 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 la. Hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Kol ha-neshama tehalelia, hallelujah. Please stand. We're on page 135. Yishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu, ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol ve'ha'kadosh, ha'shamayim u'ba'aretz, ki lechana Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu, shir u'shtacha, hallel ve'zimra berachot ve'hoda'ot, me'ata ve'ad olam. Baruch atah Adonai הבוחר בשירי זמרה, ערכו את אדוני, המבורך, המבורך, לעולם ועד, המבורך, המבורך, לעולם ועד. ברוך אדוני הבורך, לעולם ועד. Please be seated. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום ובורא את הכל, המאיר לארץ ולדרים עליה ברחמים, ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה בראשית. מה רבו מעשיך אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלאה הארץ ענייניך. תתברך אדוני אלוהינו, על שבח מעשה ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יברך סלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. Please stand. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kevod Malchuto, Leolam Vaed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, b'chol levacha, ובכל נפשך, ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה, אשר אלוקים מצווך היום על לבביך, ושילמתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך וביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקישרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטובות בעיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. Please be seated. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, ייתן קדושים למלככם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם אלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Good and beautiful and true, sound, established, and enduring are these words now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song. Mi chamocha va'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh nora, tehilot oseh feleh nora, tehilot oseh שירה חדשה שבחו גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו, והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני, אדוני, ימלוך,
ימלוך,
לעולם,
לעולם,
ועד,
ועד,
אדוני,
אדוני,
ימלוך,
ימלוך,
לעולם, לעולם, ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, קום עלינו, אדוני, צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, קהל ישראל. We rise for the Amidah on page 140.
Adonai שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך.
ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, כומר חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם בעזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, בחיי מתים אתה רק להושיע. משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריע את השמש ומוריד הטל. מחכה חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו בלי שני עפר. מי כמוך על גבורות, ומיתו מלך, מלך נמית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמי מרום, ככתוב על יד נביאך. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלך כל הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם. ברוך כבוד אדוני, ממקומו. במקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו כי מחכים אנחנו לך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור,
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש, קדושתך נקדיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש, לעולם לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. Please be seated. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עובדי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עובדי שבת. מקדשי שביב שבת, כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטובך שבת. וישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עובדי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עובדי שבת. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו שבת. חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עובדי שבת. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי 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 שבת וקוראי עובדי שבת. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us by your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. Retzei Adonai Eloheinu be'amecha Yisrael u'tefiratam be'ahava tekaber u'tehi leratzon tamid u'tehi leratzon tamid avodat Yisrael amecha. Baruch atah Adonai she'otecha levadecha v'yir'ah na'avod she'otecha levadecha thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God, as you are the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, the source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due.
Sim shalom tova uracha chen v'chesed berachamim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha barchenu avinu kulanu kechad ve'or panecha ki ve'or panecha natat lanu Adonai Eloheinu. Sim shalom tova uracha chen v'chesed merachamim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha Torat chaim ve'ahavat chesed u'tzedaka u'bracha ve'rachamim ve'chaim ve'shalom. Sim shalom tova uracha chen v'chesed ve'rachamim alenu ve'al kol Yisrael amecha וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל ואת כל העמים בכל עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. שים שלום טובה וברכה חן וחסד ורחמים עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני עושה השלום.
Let's take a few moments now for our own personal private prayers.
Shalom Yomah, Uyase Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol Bnei Adam, Yase Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael.
So a birthday is such a private thing, isn't it? It's your own moment, but it's also very nice to celebrate those moments with community. And so I'd like to call certainly everybody whose birthday is in November. Do we have any November birthdays? Any November birthdays?
Lots of Octobers.
Anybody who missed the October opportunity and would like to mark it now? And anybody who wants to get ahead of the game and do December?
Just in case you're not coming later.
I'm not quite ready to go to January.
We haven't unfolded this for nothing.
Has anyone had a birthday this year?
Or next year.
Or next year? I think it was a special one.
Go for it. How many of you
Anyone
guys
especially tall to
a zero at the end of it? Yeah, I know about those.
very tall.
We're keeping that quiet though.
Yeah.
You'll see.
וישבר אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב ואמותינו שרה רבקה רחל ולאה הוא יברך את כל העולים היום לכבוד השבת ולכבוד התורה. May God, who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless all those who come before the community today to mark their birthday some month with reverence for God and respect for the Torah. Grateful to you for the gift of life which they have enjoyed to this day. May the Holy One continue to bless them with length of years, good health, the pleasures of Torah study, and the profound satisfaction that comes from a life of masim tovim, of good deeds. In celebrating this and other birthdays, may their example remind us that people may count the days of their life, but a person of wisdom makes every day count.
Oh.
And let us say together, Amen,
Amen.
and Mazel Tov.
Particularly welcome tall people.
And now we turn in our Sidurim to page 481, our service for reading of Torah. En kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai, ven kemaasecha, malchutecha malchut kol olamim, וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Eloheinu, Gadol Adonai iti, Umeron Shemo. והתפארת והנצח וההוד תיכון בשמיים ובארץ תיכון בשמיים ובארץ לך אדוני הממלכה והמית נעשה לכל ראש רוממו, רוממו, אדוני אלוהינו, והשתחוו, והשתחוו, לאדון רגל הקדוש הוא, רוממו, ויתרוממו אדוני אלוהינו והשתחוו להר קודשו כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו. Every community, because of its geography, that is the layout of the room, has a different, and also the customs that it follows, has a different number of songs that need to be done at any given time. So in Toronto, where we had quite a large sanctuary, we would do as one of our hakafah, we process the Torah in that community. One of the song Al Shlosha Devarim, the music director for many years, Ben Steinberg, had inserted a little extra piece so that when you did it, if you inserted the extra piece, people would be returning to the bima at exactly the right moment. Now, what happens when you change sanctuaries? So I'm still, when I do Al Shlosha Devarim, I usually do that little insert, which now in many of the places that I work is too long. But I like it. What are you going to do? Our Torah portion, as you know, is Toldot. And like so many of the stories in Torah, particularly in Bereshit, there's what looks like a fairly straightforward narrative, and it is straightforward until you actually start to narrate it. And then you discover things that you can't quite understand. Quite a bit. So here, one of the things that people have been wondering for years is, what's the story with this guy Isaac? Is he just a nebbish? I mean, what makes him a patriarch? And I think what makes him a patriarch is that he happens to come between two more significant patriarchs, to be honest. Sorry. But what this begins, Eila Toldot Yitzchak, Avraham Holidet Yitzchak. That's his story, is that he was born. He got born into the family trade, and did not really, it seems, have exactly the pizzazz to carry on the tradition on his own, but fortunately he married well. And Rivka is just amazing. And she says, she complains, she has a direct communication with God, which makes you wonder why traditional Judaism has been so down on women for all these years, when right there in the founding patriarchy is a matriarch who does more than the patriarch that she's married to. So, and she says, she complains to God. She vatelech lidrosh et Adonai. She went off to ask God, is more or less the translation. What can that mean? Did God live around the block? And she walked down the street and turned the corner and there was God? God, I've been meaning to ask you. That's the way the text reads. It's very familiar. And in these passages we see so many moments of real, God is a character in the story like all the other characters in the story. Don't be insulted, it's not a bad thing. And of course that changes. Richard Elliott Friedman, the biblical scholar, has written a remarkable book called, I think it's got more than one title depending on where it was published, but it's called The Disappearing Face of God. And that's so interesting because we see in the beginning, in Genesis, God is very personal, very immanent, as we say if you're a religion geek. And over the course of time, God withdraws more and more progressively. And he says, and makes the case persuasively, as I recall it, all the way through the New Testament, in fact. Through the Christian Bible, God continually withdraws. And that's so interesting. Why the books of the Hebrew Bible were organized in such a way so that largely occurs. But here we have that personal God. And God answers her. Vayomer Adonai la. And God says to her, he speaks. She asks, and he speaks. How many of us get that? So then we get the story that is so familiar about the relationship between Jacob and Esau. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but what might we be on the lookout for? Well, you'll recognize the names Esau, and Yaakov, and Nazid, Vayazed, Nazid. Nazid is a stew. Basically, it's the kind of thing you have on Shabbat if you're observant, kind of a chont sort of thing, I would say. And Yaakov has apparently the same root as Akev, meaning heel. You'll hear that. And Edom, that happens a few times. Ha'adom hazeh, this red stuff, meaning the stew. Do they have tomatoes? I don't think so. But somehow it was that was the color of it, and that then gets ascribed to Esau and his descendants. So, Yamod la Torah. Who's my Aliyah? Okay, great. We have a. Oh, can we start?
And you want me to read?
Oh no! Some people touch their talit to the spot.
No,
but we don't.
I don't bother.
Oh, that's fine.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMavarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim. V'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen. Ve'ele toldot Yitzchak ben Abraham holidet Yitzchak. Vayehi Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto et Rivka. V'aftetu el ha'arami mipadan aram achot Lavan ha'arami lo le'isha. Vayetar Yitzchak l'Adonai lenochach ishto ki yakara hi. Vayeater lo Adonai, vatahar Rivka ishto, vayitrotzetsu habanim bekirba, vatomer imkein, lama ze anochi, vatelech lidrosh et Adonai, vayomer Adonai la, shnei goyim bevitnech u'shnei leumim mime'ayich liparedu, ולאום מלאום יאמץ ורב יעבוד צעיר. וימלאו ימיה ללדת והנה תומים בבטנה. ויצא הראשון אדמוני כולו כעדרת שיער ויקראו שמו עשיו. ואחרי כן יצא אחיו וידו אוחזת בעקב עשיו. ויקרא שמו יעקב, ויצחק בן 60 שנה ולדת אותם, ויגדלו הנערים, ויהי עשיו איש, יודע ציד איש שדה, ויעקב איש תם יושב אוהלים. ויאהב יצחק את עשיו כי ציד בפיו, ורבקה אוהבת את יעקב. ויעזד יעקב לזיד, ויבוא עשיו מן השדה והוא עייף. ויאמר עשיו אל יעקב, הליטני נא מן האדום הזה, כי עייף אנוכי, על כן קרא שמו אדום. ויאמר יעקב, מכרח היום את בכורתך לי. ויאמר עשיו, הנה אנוכי הולך למות, ולמה זה לי בכורה? ויאמר יעקב, הישבע לי כיום, וישבע לו. וימכור את בכורתו ליעקב. ויעקב נתן לעשיו לחם ונזיד עדשים, ויאכל וישת ויקום וילך, ויבז עשיו את הבכורה. This is the story of Isaac, son of Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac. Isaac was 40 years old when he took to wife Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean of Padan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. It's interesting, we say know nothing about him between his being born and his getting married. Those are the things he does. Isaac pleaded with the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord responded to his plea, and his wife Rebekah conceived. But the children struggled in her womb, and she said, "If so, why do I exist?" And she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord answered her, "Two nations are in your womb, two separate peoples shall issue from your body. One people shall be mightier than the other, and the older shall serve the younger." Incidentally, the Hebrew is quite consistent with the reading, "and the older, the younger will serve." You could read it either way. When the time came to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first one emerged red, like a hairy mantle all over, so they named him Esau. Then his brother emerged, holding on to the heel of Esau, and so they named him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when they were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the outdoors. But Jacob was Ish-Tam is the Hebrew. Tam doesn't exactly mean mile. It means some version of innocent, don't you think? We sometimes use it, we will see it in the Passover Seder as well. Jacob was a mild man, it says here, who stayed in camp, who dwelt in tents, is the Hebrew text. Isaac favored Esau because he had a taste for game, because of the meat in his mouth. But Rebekah favored Jacob. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the fields, famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Give me some of that red stuff to gulp down, because I'm famished," which is why he was named Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." And Esau said, "I'm at the point of death, so what use is my birthright to me?" But Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Jacob then gave Esau bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank, and he rose and he left. Thus did Esau spurn the birthright.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam natah b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, notei haTorah.
Just before we lift the scroll, I'd like to take this moment to think of those in our community who are ill and those who care for them. So with our Sefer Torah open before us, we think of those in our community who are unwell, and perhaps if you'd like to say the name aloud of someone who'd like to be thought of at this time for strength and healing, that would be lovely as I look your way.
My sister Susan Schoenfield has just yesterday had a hip operation, and she's getting better. It'll take time.
Jeanette, Phyllis and Rosetta.
Colin Oaken, a family friend who was very, very ill.
Our friend Cindy York, who's having back trouble.
Vivian Lackford and my cousin Nikki and her husband Bill.
מי שברך אבותינו ואברהם יצחק ויעקב ואמותינו שרה רבקה ורחל ולאה הוא יברך וירפא את כל החולים האלה ונאמר אמן. May the God who blessed our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah bless and heal all those in our community who are ill, and together we say Amen. Amen. Please rise. Baruch Shematan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'Kedushato.
Mommy, can I have some light please?
Please be seated. Ta'amod ha'maftira. Can I sit near you?
The Haftorah reading this morning is from the book of Malachi, and I really don't know very much about Malachi, but he has very clear phrases, and he is the last of the prophets that is mentioned. And you will find the reading on page 1101 in the JPSA Tanakh, and I'm not sure about the Chumash. I'll be reading chapter 1, verses 1 to 11. It's all ones this morning for some reason.
Okay, 159 in the Chumash.
159 in the Chumash, thank you, Lindsay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar b'nbiim tovim, v'rachza v'divreihem hana'emarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah, v'moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amo, u'v'nbi'ei ha'emet b'tzedek. A pronouncement, the word of the Lord to Israel through Malachi. I have shown you love, said the Lord. But you ask, how have you shown us love? After all, declares the Lord, Esau is Jacob's brother, yet I have accepted Jacob and have rejected Esau. I have made his hills a desolation, his territory a home for the beasts of the desert. If Edom thinks, though crushed, we can build the ruins again, thus said the Lord of hosts, they may build, but I will tear down. And so they shall be known as the region of wickedness, the people damned forever of the Lord. Your eyes shall behold it, and you shall declare, great is the Lord beyond the borders of Israel. And I must add to this that there seems to be a huge subtext against Esau in the whole story. And if you read it carefully, Esau was actually a very good person. He just wasn't the one who was chosen by God to lead the children of Israel. So I'm all for Esau, and I need to say this because I think he gets a rotten press very unfair. But I continue. A son should honour his father and a slave his master. Now, if I am a father, where is the honour due me? And if I am a master, where is the reverence due me? Said the Lord of hosts to you, O priests who scorn my name. But you ask, how have we scorned your name? You offer defiled food on my altar. But you ask, how have we defiled you? By saying, the table of the Lord can be treated with scorn. When you present a blind animal for sacrifice, it doesn't matter. When you present a lame or sick one, it doesn't matter. Just offer it to your governor. Will he accept you? Will he show you favour? Said the Lord of hosts. And now implore the favour of God. Will he be gracious to us? This is what you have done. Will he accept any of you? The Lord of hosts has said, if only you would lock my doors and not kindle fire on my altar to no purpose. I take no pleasure in you, said the Lord of hosts, and I will accept no offering from you. For from where the sun rises to where it sets, my name is honoured among the nations, and everywhere incense and pure oblation are offered to my name. For my name is honoured among the nations, said the Lord of hosts. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, tzur kol ha'olamim, tzadik b'chol hadorot, ha'el ha'ne'eman ha'omer v'oseh, ha'medaber v'mekayem, shekol devarav emet v'tzedek, al ha'torah v'al ha'avodah v'al ha'nevi'im v'al yom ha'shabbat hazeh, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו לקדושה ולמלוכה לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Schreich, well done. Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity. Eternal God, as you blessed our ancestors in generations past, bless now this congregation, its leaders and its members, and all who enter this synagogue to meet, to study, and to pray. Comfort the sorrowing hearts among us, and heal those in anxiety or pain. May we all find here community and friendship, renewal of purpose and hope, a deeper understanding of our heritage, and a sense of your abiding presence. Bless all congregations of the house of Israel throughout the world, that those who live under oppressive rule soon be freed, and may we all unite to witness to your truth and do your will. Eternal God, our rock and redeemer, grant blessing to the state of Israel, created to fulfill an age-old dream and to be a haven for the oppressed. Inspire its leaders and citizens with faithfulness to the aims of its founders, to develop the land for the benefit of all its inhabitants, and to implement the prophetic ideals of liberty and justice. May they live in harmony with one another and in peace with their neighbors, and cause to come true once more the ancient vision that out of Zion shall go forth Torah and the word of God from Jerusalem. Yahalelu et Shem Adonai, ki niskab Shemo levado, hovo al eretz v'shamayim, hayar et eret le'amo, tehila lechol chasidav, b'nei Yisrael, am kerovo. God's teaching is perfect,
reviving the soul.
God's word is unfailing,
making wise the simple.
God's precepts are right,
enlightening the mind.
God's commandments are clear,
enlightening the eyes.
God's doctrine is pure,
enduring forever.
God's guidance is true,
and altogether just.
Ki lekach tov natati lachem, Torati al ta'azovu, et hayim la'achazikim ba, betom teha meushar, eracheha ta'teinoam, v'chol netivoteha shalom, Hashiveinu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva, Chadesh, Chadesh Yameinu, Chadesh Yameinu
Oh, should we retire? High five.
Please be seated. So we've already seen how rotten the relationship is between Jacob and Esau. It was trouble literally from the beginning. Rebekah was carrying twins. They struggled within her. The struggle continued as they grew up. The two boys represent two ways of being in the world. Esau, I suppose you could say, is the kind of man who always succeeded, who knew how to get things done, and didn't think much about past his immediate needs. Jacob, a quiet man, quiet, simple, we don't know exactly what that word means, who lived in tents, as we're told, was in a way a new kind of man, his life circling not around the immediate needs of life, but something else, a world of thought, words, agreements, consequence, past and future. Jacob lives in a world more similar to ours, I think. Esau was very strong in his world, and Jacob strong in his. Neither could really appreciate the other's strength until long after the events that we read about today. So as the two boys grow up, we can see the two lifestyles reflected quite starkly in this first encounter between them that we're told of, when Esau returns from hunting, famished and exhausted, and sells his birthright. We don't know exactly what this is, but it was clearly something that provides a distinct benefit that one either has or hasn't got, which ordinarily falls automatically to the firstborn, but which apparently can be sold and transferred. Throughout the stories about Esau and Jacob, Esau is painted with a broad brush, a tough guy but not too smart and certainly not crafty. Jacob, a more delicate creation, afraid of his brother, but seemingly aware of how unsuitable Esau is to carry on a tradition which includes much more than Esau can really even imagine. The fact that Esau would so casually sell his birthright is of itself an indication that he doesn't know what it is that he's selling. And he may not believe that the sale is real, since it's not something he can shoot with his bow. And in any case, he knows he's never going to stop being the firstborn. Later in the portion, Isaac announces to Esau that he should bring him a meal and receive the blessing as firstborn. Rebekah hears this and insists, and Rebekah, that's one sharp dame, she insists that Jacob disguise himself as his brother and receive the blessing instead. This part of the story is as hard for me to believe as the opera plots that I used to sing with their implausible disguises. Would they really fool anyone? Could they be anything other than a plot device? Would the Count really not recognize his wife if she were dressed in Susanna's clothing? Really? Really? I mean, wouldn't you meet your spouse dressed in somebody else's clothes, and you say, what are you wearing that for? You don't say, you must be Susanna, because you're... So I wonder the same thing here. Can Isaac really not know which son is before? Really? Really? So there is some evidence that he does know, if you look at the text carefully. And I want to say, my late wife used to say to me, why do you talk about these people as if they're real? They're clearly not. They're literary creations. They may have some relationship to people that lived thousands of years ago, but we can know nothing about them. And I said, it's true, but literary figures are real. It's something she wouldn't have disagreed with, incidentally. And if she were here arguing, she would tell you what she really said. But I find that the reality of these literary figures is as important as if they were somebody that we knew who lived down the block, the way God seems to in the story as well. So the evidence that he knows, if you look at his reaction when he finds out that he's been fooled, he doesn't banish Jacob and give the blessing to Esau as he originally intended. He says, who was it then who hunted game and I blessed him, and now he must remain blessed? But why must he remain blessed at least in the material sense of inheriting the family holding, if he achieved it through deceit? Isaac may not be the sharpest knife in the patriarchal drawer, but he's onto something here. He's got something about his two sons. I find, though, that like you, I continue to be struck and moved by Esau's tragedy. He is not bright, but he trusted and was made a fool of by his mother and his brother. And that moment of betrayal, when this strong man cries in shame and humiliation, it's as tragic as any Greek myth. It's worth reading the passage. It's later. When Esau heard his father's words, he burst into wild and bitter sobbing and said to his father, bless me too, Father. But he answered, your brother came with guile and took away your blessing. Esau said, was he then named Jacob, that he might supplant me these 2 times? First he took away my birthright, and now he has taken away my blessing. The passage does answer one question. It says, did Esau realize that he had sold his birthright when he traded it for beans? So he did. He knew what he was doing. Clearly, but it was still a betrayal by those closest to him, and he deserved better. This disturbed our sages, as you would hope. The text of the Torah implies that Esau deserved what he got, and comes this close to mocking him for his credulousness and his brutishness. But though the Torah does not pass judgment on Jacob's deceit, we also repeats him over and over for it. So we don't get an automatic plot twist that says, Isaac saying, I changed my mind, and I gave it to the wrong one, and I'm working it out that way. No. Jacob is the inheritor. Everybody accepts it. But he pays. He himself is deceived by his sons when they present him with Joseph's blood-stained coat. And the themes of the right of the firstborn, blessing, and name return later like ghosts of this betrayal. It's much more significant than it appears on the surface. And on the surface it does appear big, but even bigger as we continue the reading. Only when he and his brother finally reconcile does Jacob receive God's blessing and the change of name from Jacob, Yaakov, the supplanter, the grabber at heels, to Israel. And Israel is not a triumphant name, you know. We might think of it that way sometimes, but it's just the opposite. It's, in a way, it describes us, and we often talk about it as the wrestler, the one who is continually struggling. And that, it is not a sudden enlightenment, like some religions have, where all the truth is suddenly revealed to him. No, the truth that's revealed to him is that he has to struggle with it all the time. And that's what makes this, in some ways, a contemporary document more than it looks on the surface. Yes, it is a kind of a window into times past, but it's also something else. It reminds us that there is no point of certainty, not even in the central text of our tradition. And I find this again and again, these surprising moments of there is no answer, and you, the reader, must be the one to struggle with it yourself. And boy, I'm not going to talk politics, believe me, but with an election coming up, that there are no good outcomes. There's only, we hope, marginally less bad outcomes. And that is the kind of thing that the Torah, in a way, prepares us for. It says you're not going to make a good decision. You're going to make a bad decision. And you'll make many of them. And then maybe you'll make some good decisions. And they may turn out good and they may turn out bad. But there's something else that runs like a thread through the story. And that thing is, which we see in ultimately Jacob becoming Israel, reflecting the change in his moral standing as he begins to grow up into adulthood, and real adulthood, the adulthood that some people never achieve. Jacob does not acknowledge explicitly what he's done and how bad it is. His dream, though, of wrestling with a man the night before he meets, and we don't know if it's a dream or an angel, who knows? It's, after all, literary. But the night before he meets with Esau, his long estranged brother, of whom he is terrified, it's a sign of what has gone on in his development since that time. And acknowledging it and being forgiven by his brother is the necessary step Jacob must take internally to become the man who is finally worthy of the benefit that he cheated to achieve. And he is thus blessed by God and becomes Israel, he who wrestles. And he's bequeathed that uncertainty and uneasiness to us that we have to live with. And that's why we keep coming back to these stories and back to this place where the truths of our lives meet with our tradition in a way that, if we allow it, will bring us something that we can't quite describe, but allows us to live in the world in a way that is really unique. Now, on my way here, I was reading an article about a Scottish political personality of whom I had never heard. I get the London Review of Books, and because I was a student for 5 years, I'm literally 1 year behind in my reading, and I've decided to slowly read ahead until maybe I'll catch up. I don't know, sometime in a year or two I'll be actually reading the ones that come in the post. But this, it described, this guy was writing about, suddenly refers to the Jews as like the leaven that goes through society because we are outside of ordinary national boundaries. We move through the world in a way that, functioning almost like the yeast that makes the bread rise, we have a certain special effect on the world. And I found it very intriguing, literally on the tube on my way here. Not a bad, you can't do that when you're driving. That makes sense to me, and it also fits with this story, that it is the very uncertainness of our lives as Jews, the precariousness of what it means to be Jewish. We have downstairs another community with, in some ways, different values, different ideas, and we all are still part of the same larger community, Klal Yisrael, which is so amazing. And it is that I think we can find, if we look hard enough for it, in this portion as well. And it's if you look for answers, you won't find them. But if you look for questions and struggle, you will. And that's where I believe this Torah portion speaks to us as modern people today. So may it give you courage leading up to December 12th, because whatever decision you make, we have no idea how it's going to come out. And may it also give you a sense of satisfaction that your presence here has meaning not just for us, but meaning in a larger world that we can't see, but which I think is valid and important and worthy of our time and attention and the enormous efforts that you all here put into keeping this community alive and moving forward. So with that, I say Shabbat Shalom. We'll say it plenty more times before the morning is over. And let's turn in our Sidurim to the Aleinu on page 520. We rise for the Aleinu. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, אשר שם דרכנו לייחד את שמו, וגור עלינו להמליך מלכותו. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא השמיים ויסד הארץ, ומושב יקרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינת זו בגובה מרומים. הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס זולתו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום בהשבות אל לבביך. כי אדוני הוא האלוהים, בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת אין עוד. Trusting in you, eternal God, we hope soon to behold the glory of your might, when false gods will vanish from our hearts, and idolatry cease forever. Help us to perfect the world by bringing it under your unchallenged rule, when all who invoke your name relinquish evil and live alone. May all who dwell on earth come to know that to you every knee must bend and every tongue swear loyalty. Before you let them humble themselves, and to your glorious name let them give honor. Let them all submit to your sovereign rule. May that time come soon and last forever. For ultimate sovereignty is yours, and to all eternity you will reign in glory, as it is written, the eternal one shall reign forever. ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו It is hard to feel serene when our world is not complete, when those who once brought wholeness to our life have gone. Yet in the emptiness their passing leaves behind, we are not alone. For we have the companionship of the living, and even our loved ones who have died live on in our hearts. But what they were is part of what we have become. We honor them best when we live as they would wish, responsibly and happily, even in the shadow of our loss, and so draw closer to the source of life, in whom every life finds meaning, purpose, and hope. This Shabbat we are particularly conscious of those whose yahrzeit we mark today: Barbara Baum, the mother of Jennifer Gridley and also mother of Jonathan Baum; Stanley Jacobs, husband of Barbara Jacobs; Norman Kay, friend of Lindsay Cohn and friend of Adrian Cohn; David Pennell, the husband of Elaine Pennell; Lillian Solomon, mother of Aubrey Scott. If there are any names to add to this list, or any names that you pronounce differently than I did, please say them aloud as I look your way. Zichronam Livracha, may their memories be for a blessing. We turn to Kaddish on page 524.
Yitgadal Yishkadash Shnei Rabbo, Yamad Yirah Kirutei Yamik Malkutei, Achayechon Yomechon, Achayech B'chol Beit Yisrael, V'Agadal Bisman Kariv Yimru Amen, Yehei Shnei Rabbo Barach Le'olam Yomei Amaya, Yitbarach Yishtabach Yitbarach Yitronam Yitnaseh, Yitadal Yitalel Yitalal Shnei Kedusha B'Richu, Ve'eram Mikol B'Chata B'Shirata, Tushbachata B'Nechemata, Yamim Yomah B'Imru Amen. Yehei Shalom Alam Amin Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, B'Imru Amen. Osei Shalom B'Roma, U'yasei Shalom, Aleinu Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ve'al Kol B'nei Adam, B'Imru Amen.
The source of peace, and peace to all who mourn, and comfort to the bereaved among us, and we say, Amen. Please be seated. Have we any announcements?
Well, first, it's not an announcement, it is a massive thank you to Gershon. One thing, I was just looking around and seeing all the smiles on everyone's face in the congregation, so that really does sum up how you've done. And actually, when I invited you as cantor, Gershon, not realising it's rabbi.
Well, it's both.
It's both, it is both, so it added an extra dimension, so thank you very much. The Kiddush duties.
So I surmise.
It's not the effect I have on people, I can assure you. So we lock the doors just in case. So other announcements, have you got a few minutes?
Yes, I do.
Because I sometimes forget what I've arranged. Next Friday night service is being held at the Vulcans household. There is a limited capacity because they've got a small new place actually very close to here. But if you can let me know if you're interested in coming along. But it would be nice if we had a reasonable number because we're actually being the synagogue to them because it's difficult for them to come to us. So if you're free next Friday night, it's lovely. He serves a lovely community, homely feel to them. So that's next Friday. And next Shabbat, well, we've got another cantorial service. We've got Joseph, who's now sort of taking the service solo. And again, like with Gershon, he has another dimension to what's our normal sort of services. So please come along if you can. Any other announcements around the room? Have you got any announcements? Henry, rather. Henry, any announcements? Anything you'd like to add?
Discretion, the better part.
Yeah. I noticed how attached Henry was to the actual baby scroll.
Yeah.
Was noticed. Closing hymn?
Yes, let's turn to page 525, and just for a change, we'll sing Adon Olam.
Which version?
You took me at session time, there were at least another 8 minutes of prayer.
So we should.
We can
probably
have 2 songs. I'm going to request.
Well, this is, I have lots of different, what's the plural, Adons Olam, like we say attorneys general. I've got many different versions of Adon Olam, and I often choose them based on the fact that some of them, the first verse comes back as a refrain. And if it does, it means that we spend longer And so very often I will look out in the community and I will see those faces begging me to do a short. Don't do a long song. We've already suffered enough. We listened to your sermon. Come on. Anyway, but other times it feels like, we could get some singing done here. So this tune you may or may not know. Some of you may have heard it because I brought it here about 9 years ago to liberal Judaism generally, and it has spread around. But if you don't know it, the refrain will come back and give you an opportunity to sing if you didn't do so the first time. Adon olam Hashem alach b'tzerem kol yetzir nivra le'ed nasa v'chetzor kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'acharei kiflot hakol levado yimloch nora ve'hu haya ve'hu hoved ve'hu yiyeh v'tifara Adon olam Hashem alach b'tzerem kol yetzir nivra le'ed nasa v'chetzor kol azai melech shemo nikra ve'hu echad ve'et sheni להמשילו, להחדירה, ולראשית ולתכלית, ולא העוז והמקרא. אדון עולם השם מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא, והוא אלי וחי גולי, וצור חברי בעת צרה, והוא ניסי ומנוס לי, מנת כוסי ויום אקרא. אדון עולם השם מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא. ויבוא כדרוכי, ואת ישן והעירה, וימרוכי גבירתי, אדוני לי ולא יירא. אדון עולם השם מלך, בטרם כל יציר נברא, לעת נשא וחפצו כל, אזי מלך שמו נקרא. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. May the Eternal One guard your going out and your coming in, now and forever. And we say, Amen, and Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom. You did well.
So you're welcome to schmooze up here, or you might want to join in sort of downstairs.
Oh, that sounds nice.
One with my pigeonhole. I suspect it's around that area. If you turn into the left on the left side.
Great, yeah, I love it.
The only way we can give him days off sometimes.
Well, I have to do it either way.
Recovering slowly. It just takes time. It's a very slow process, but she's having a bit of physio and stuff like that. So it's getting really
yeah, that was his best thing.
My pleasure.
Danielle's got
I know, again, I was thinking.
she's got allergies. Yes. got a few weeks of it, and then slow progress. Yes, very good. My mother was 84. She broke her hip about start October.
It's very tough. Very tough.
You're going to go to the hospital about and the rehab.
So hard to be away from home.
But she still wants that.
Yeah, of course. It takes a while.
Have you picked up your
No, he's not very well because my dad's 88 and he's such a shock. There are carers who come in. Of course. Do the washing, a bit of cooking, stuff like that. Like it's exactly what my mum says. First time we spent 62 years.
We're going to go downstairs for us.
He's learned. He's good learner. He's done the line. So they're actually in it quite close to us.
Shabbat shalom.
Are you alright?
Can I leave my things here and go downstairs, or bring them down? Or?
I'll bring them down and say you come back here.
Thank you so much. It was lovely.
Oh, thanks.
What's substantial? What's substantial?
Shabbat shalom.
Well, you do.
Substantial.
Substantial. Well, I mean, it's good. Substantial is better, yeah. I know that. Like yours, I know.
Yeah, one of the two lost.
No, they're terrific. They're good.
Very important to know the root of your word.
Indeed.
If we don't know the root of the word, we are straight in many days.
So which particular shoresh root are you thinking of at this moment?
I'm talking about the struggle and the
Wait,
wrestling
or Israel?
between Jacob and God. There is very deep understanding.
Well, there can be, yeah. So what root are you thinking? Are there words that come to mind when you say this?
Not necessarily wrestling to show the power, but ambition.
Interesting. Yeah, that could be.
Ambition.
I'll have to take a look at it again.
How to fight against God is impossible. You ever fail? Anytime fail.
And yet we keep on doing it.
If you are humble, you are blessed.
Yeah.
No
saying the
wrestling.
word is substantial. I really didn't sleep. Right, I listened to every word.
Well, okay.
Honestly. And, it sounds patronising.
No.
Substantial.
I have fallen asleep in my own concerts.
No.
Literally. I take that very seriously.
No, I do really mean it.
No, thank you so much.
I'm an old guy and I can be patronising, but that was just great, honestly.
Thank you.
I mean, of course, I don't come all that often, but it was really...
Well, I'm happy you came this time.
Yeah, and I like the accent as well. I'm used to the accent.
You're used to it by now.
No.
Frank and I are not from the same place in America, but we do have two important things in common. Actually, three. One is we're both American, although I'm also Canadian. Number two is we wear the same shoes. I don't know if you noticed. That's how we originally started talking.
I was looking at that the whole time.
Yeah, that's all. And number three, although he's a professional photographer, I'm a kind of a very bad amateur photographer, and that's a thing that he and I share.
You should revel in that, because we don't need to be embroidered with how good. I mean, he's a photographer.
He's a
very
professional.
Professional.
Yeah. No, he's terrific. Yeah. And I'm not, but I do like.
You don't care, but you're terrific. Really
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
But you are a good rabbi.
Thank you.
Good rabbi.
Thank you so much.
God bless.
What occurred to me, one of the things that occurred to me in a minute, is that Jacob
was not honoring his grandpa
in not just giving food, not just give a stranger, to his brother.
He did give it to him, but he demanded something for it.
But Abraham is welcoming people at his table. He doesn't charge them rent or for the food.
Yes,
Get
that's
the
a very
blessing
interesting
from-
point. I didn't think
Mind
about
you,
that.
he did get a blessing for Sarah, not that he asked for it. I mean, it's not, nothing is straightforward, but it's so interesting.
We wouldn't have a story if it were.
Right about that.
As you said yesterday, it was the EastEnders, and I said the Middle Eastenders.
The Middle Eastenders.
Very
Oh, that's
good,
great.
isn't it?
I gotta remember all this stuff.
Should we go down? Well, that's right. Hang on.
In the 5 years.